The air inside the Wembley Arena on July 16, 1997, was charged with anticipation, a living entity of its own that seemed to pulse and breathe with the collective energy of 25,000 souls. The History World Tour had already been making headlines across Europe, with each performance more spectacular than the last. But tonight there was something different in the atmosphere, something almost tangible that danced just beyond the edge of perception. Perhaps it was the unseasonable warmth of the London summer evening, or perhaps it was something more profound, a cosmic alignment that would transform an already extraordinary event into a moment that would transcend entertainment and touch the very essence of human connection. The stage stood in darkness, a technological temple of lights, speakers, and carefully positioned platforms waiting to be awakened. Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency along the barriers, their eyes constantly scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. Merchandise vendors made their final rounds, hawking T-shirts, programs, and the miniature replicas of Michael's iconic fedora that had become the must-have souvenir of the tour. And in the front row, positioned directly center stage, sat a young woman named Sarah Wilkins, her face tilted slightly upward, her unseeing eyes hidden behind dark glasses, her fingers wrapped around a white cane adorned with small silver bells that tinkled softly whenever she moved. Sarah had been blind since birth, the result of a rare genetic condition that had left her with no visual reference for the world around her. But what she lacked in sight, she had more than compensated for in hearing. Her auditory sensitivity was so acute that she could identify people by the pattern of their breathing, distinguish the make of a car by the unique frequency of its engine, and most remarkably, deconstruct complex musical arrangements into their individual instrumental components with preternatural precision. It was this extraordinary ability that had drawn her to Michael Jackson's music as a child. While other fans were captivated by his revolutionary videos and electric stage presence, Sarah experienced his art on a different level entirely. She heard layers in his compositions that many producers had missed, subtle vocal inflections that communicated emotion more powerfully than any visual performance could. For her, attending tonight's concert was not about seeing the king of pop. It was about being in the physical presence of the sound that had shaped her understanding of music itself. The crowd's murmur suddenly shifted in pitch and intensity, a sure sign that something was about to happen. Sarah straightened in her seat, her head tilting slightly as she processed the auditory information around her. Her mother, seated beside her, reached over to squeeze her hand in excitement. "The lights just went down completely," she whispered, continuing the practice they had established years ago of translating visual experiences into words. Sarah nodded, her focus already elsewhere, her exceptional hearing picking up the subtle clicks and whirs of machinery behind the stage that signaled the beginning of the show. And then it happened. The first synthesizer notes of Scream erupted from the massive speakers, so powerful that Sarah could feel the sound waves vibrating through her body. The crowd exploded into a frenzy of screams and applause as Michael rose from beneath the stage, silhouetted against a massive screen of pulsing light. Sarah's face broke into a smile of pure joy, her hands rising instinctively to feel the music in the air around her. The concert progressed through a carefully choreographed setlist, each song a masterpiece of sound and spectacle. Michael's voice soared over the instrumentation, powerful and vulnerable in equal measure, telling stories of pain, hope, and transcendence. Sarah remained in a state of almost spiritual rapture throughout, her body swaying gently to rhythms that she perceived more completely than anyone else in the arena. During Earth Song, she wept openly, overwhelmed by the raw emotion in Michael's voice as he pleaded for environmental consciousness and human compassion. Her mother described in whispered detail the elaborate staging, the bulldozer that rolled on stage, the dramatic lighting effects, the expressions on Michael's face as he delivered his message of planetary stewardship. But for Sarah, the visual elements were superfluous. She was experiencing the pure essence of the performance, unfiltered through the distraction of spectacle. It was during the bridge of "You Are Not Alone" that something unexpected happened. Michael, who had been moving across the stage with his characteristic fluid grace, suddenly stopped mid-choreography. Those close enough to see his face clearly noticed a change in his expression, a moment of sudden focus, of attention caught and held by something in the audience. He raised a hand to shield his eyes from the stage lights, peering intently into the front rows. The dancers continued their routine around him, professionals adapting seamlessly to the unplanned pause. Michael stepped closer to the edge of the stage, still singing without missing a note, and pointed directly at Sarah. The security team exchanged glances, unsure of what was happening but prepared to respond to any direction from their employer. Sarah, of course, was unaware of the attention suddenly focused on her, but she sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle change in the acoustic properties of the space as bodies around her turned in her direction. As the song concluded, Michael addressed the audience, his voice soft but perfectly modulated to carry throughout the arena. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," he said, the sincerity in his tone unmistakable even to those most cynical about celebrity sentiment. "Each of you brings something special to this experience. We're creating this moment together." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, but Michael wasn't finished. "I've been watching someone in the front row," he continued, "someone who's been feeling this music in a way that reminds me why I do what I do." He stepped to the very edge of the stage, pointing again. "The young lady with the dark glasses. I see you." A spotlight suddenly illuminated Sarah, who froze in surprise as she felt the heat of the light on her skin. Her mother leaned over, whispering urgently in her ear, explaining what was happening. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Around them, the crowd had gone quiet, intrigued by this unexpected turn of events. Michael gestured to a security guard, who approached Sarah and her mother, bending to speak to them over the barrier. Words were exchanged, nods given, and then the guard was helping Sarah to her feet, guiding her toward a small gate in the barrier that separated the audience from the stage. Her white cane tapped rhythmically against the floor as she moved, the tiny silver bells creating a delicate counterpoint to the ambient sounds of the arena. The audience watched in fascinated silence as Sarah was led carefully up the steps to the stage. Michael met her halfway, dismissing the security guard with a gentle nod and taking Sarah's free hand in his own. He guided her to center stage, standing with her in the spotlight, allowing the audience to see what he had noticed from his performer's vantage point. The pure, unfiltered joy on her face as she experienced the music, untethered from visual distraction or social self-consciousness. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice captured by the microphone and projected throughout the arena. "Sarah," she replied, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Sarah Wilkins. I've been listening to your music since I was 4 years old." Michael smiled, visible on the massive screens that ensured even those in the farthest seats could see the interaction clearly. "Listening," he repeated thoughtfully. "Not watching. You hear things differently, don't you, Sarah?" She nodded, her face turning toward the sound of his voice with remarkable accuracy. "I hear everything," she said simply. "All the layers, all the parts other people miss because they're busy watching. I hear what you're really saying underneath all the production." A murmur rippled through the crowd as the significance of her words registered. Here was someone who experienced Michael's art in its purest form, uninfluenced by the visual controversy and media narratives that had come to overshadow his musical legacy in recent years. Michael was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Those who knew him well would have recognized the look. It was the same expression he wore in the recording studio when a particular musical phrase or lyrical concept suddenly revealed a deeper meaning or possibility. "Would you like to tell everyone what you hear in the music?" he asked finally. Sarah's posture straightened, her face lighting up with the opportunity to share what had been a private communion between herself and the soundscapes that had shaped her life. "I hear kindness," she said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "I hear someone who understands what it's like to be different, to be stared at, to be defined by other people's perceptions instead of your own truth." The arena had fallen so quiet that Sarah's voice, even without a microphone, carried clearly through the first several rows. Michael gently guided her hand to the microphone he was holding, encouraging her to continue. "When you sing," she said, "especially in songs like Will You Be There or Stranger in Moscow, there's a texture to your voice that tells the real story. People who only watch the videos or read the tabloids miss it completely. But it's right there in the sound. This longing to be understood for who you really are, not who everyone thinks you are." She paused, her free hand moving expressively as she searched for the right words. "I hear someone who's surrounded by millions of people but still feels alone sometimes. And that's why your music matters so much to people like me. Because you make us feel less alone in our aloneness." The raw vulnerability of her observation seemed to pierce through the carefully constructed persona that Michael presented to the world. Those watching the giant screens saw something extraordinary, a single tear tracking down his cheek, catching the stage lights before he quickly brushed it away. Professional to his core, he maintained his composure, but something had shifted in his demeanor, a barrier lowered, if only for a moment. "Thank you, Sarah," he said quietly, his voice carrying the slight roughness of genuine emotion. "That might be the most profound thing anyone has ever said about my work. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories about Michael Jackson's extraordinary life and the countless moments of genuine connection that revealed the man behind the legend." What happened next would be described differently by different witnesses. Some would recall that Michael whispered something to Sarah that the microphones didn't catch, something that made her smile widely and nod in agreement. Others would remember the moment in terms of the absolute silence that had fallen over 25,000 people, a shared recognition of the authenticity they were witnessing. The musicians and dancers, consummate professionals accustomed to the unexpected developments that can occur in live performances, waited patiently, understanding that something significant was unfolding. After a moment that seemed suspended in time, Michael turned to his musical director and nodded, a silent communication born of thousands of hours of collaboration. The opening notes of Man in the Mirror began to play, but in a stripped-down arrangement, just piano and subtle strings, the bombast of the full production temporarily set aside. Michael guided Sarah to a stool that had been quickly brought on stage, making sure she was comfortably seated before stepping back to begin the song. But this performance was different from any other on the tour. Instead of delivering the choreographed routine that typically accompanied the anthem, Michael stood still, his focus entirely on the music and on Sarah, who swayed gently to the melody, her face a study in rapturous attention. His voice took on a quality that even longtime fans in the audience had rarely heard. Unadorned, emotionally raw, each word delivered with deliberate care, as if he were singing not to the thousands who could see him, but to the one person who truly heard him. When he reached the chorus, something remarkable happened. Michael extended his hand towards Sarah, who sensed the movement somehow and reached out in return. Taking her hand, he guided her carefully to her feet and handed her a second microphone that a stage manager had anticipated would be needed. As the chorus swelled, their voices joined together, the king of pop and the blind fan, singing about the man in the mirror, about making a change, about the shared responsibility for healing a wounded world. Sarah's voice was untrained but pure, and she knew every word, every nuance of the melody. They were an unlikely duet, standing center stage at Wembley Arena, creating a moment of connection that transcended the usual boundaries between performer and audience. The crowd, initially stunned by the unexpected development, began to join in, softly at first, then with growing confidence. The sound swelled, 25,000 voices united with the two on stage, until the arena itself seemed to vibrate with the collective affirmation of the song's message. The house lights had been brought up, allowing Michael and Sarah to see, or in her case, to sense, the ocean of humanity sharing in the moment they had created. As the final chorus approached, Michael stepped back, giving Sarah the spotlight, letting her voice carry the message to which she had brought such profound insight. She sang with her whole body, one hand still holding the white cane with its silver bells, the other extended outward, as if reaching for the audience she could feel but not see. As the song concluded, the applause that erupted was unlike anything the tour had experienced before. Not the typical screaming adulation of fans worshiping an idol, but something deeper, more reverent. It was the sound of acknowledgement, of gratitude for a genuine human connection shared by thousands. Michael embraced Sarah briefly, then reached into his jacket pocket and removed an object that caught the stage lights in a flash of silver. It was a small crystal pendant in the shape of a musical note, suspended on a delicate chain. He placed it in Sarah's hand, closing her fingers around it gently. "So you'll always remember that someone was really listening," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Sarah's fingers explored the pendant, her face registering recognition of its shape. She slipped the chain over her head, the crystal note coming to rest over her heart. As security came to escort Sarah back to her seat, the audience witnessed one final, unscripted moment. She reached up to touch Michael's face, a gesture so unexpected that the security team tensed visibly. But Michael stood perfectly still, allowing her fingers to trace the contours of his features lightly. It was how she saw him, the only way she could form an image of the man whose voice had been such a presence in her life. The touch lasted only seconds, but the intimacy of it, the trust implied on both sides, left an indelible impression on everyone who witnessed it. As Sarah was led carefully back to her seat, Michael watched her go with an expression that combined wonderment and a kind of melancholy recognition, as if he had encountered someone who understood aspects of himself that even he was still discovering. The concert resumed its planned set list, but something had fundamentally changed in the relationship between performer and audience. The spectacular effects continued. The choreography remained precise and innovative, the musicianship flawless. But there was a new layer of meaning to every song, a heightened awareness of the emotional current running beneath the entertainment. When Michael performed Heal the World as the penultimate number, the children who joined him on stage as part of the choreographed routine seemed less like stage dressing and more like a genuine expression of hope for the future. And when he finally took his bow at the end of the show, the roar that greeted him carried something more substantial than celebrity worship. It held respect, gratitude, and a shared understanding of music's power to bridge the divides between people. After the concert, as the audience filed out of Wembley Arena into the warm London night, strangers found themselves talking to each other, sharing perspectives on what they had witnessed. "I've been to every tour since Bad," one middle-aged fan told a group of teenagers who were too young to have experienced Michael's earlier performances, "and I've never seen him that genuine, that present." Others discussed Sarah, speculating about her background, expressing amazement at her insights, and the way she had appeared to perceive aspects of Michael's artistry that had eluded even dedicated fans. "It makes you wonder what we're all missing," a woman remarked to her companion as they waited for the crowd to thin at the exit. "What else we're not hearing because we're too busy looking." The encounter might have remained a beautiful but ephemeral concert moment, forgotten as the tour moved on to its next destinations, had it not been for what happened 3 months later. Sarah Wilkins, the blind fan who had shared a microphone with Michael Jackson at Wembley Arena, was invited to appear on a popular British morning television program. The producers had been searching for unique perspectives on the History World Tour, which had become as much a cultural phenomenon as a concert series, and Sarah's experience offered a completely different angle. Seated on the studio's sofa, her white cane resting against her leg, the crystal musical note pendant visible against her blouse, Sarah spoke with eloquence about how music had shaped her understanding of the world, how sound created landscapes and emotional terrains more vivid than visual images could ever be for her. When the host asked about her experience with Michael Jackson, expecting the typical fan adoration narrative, Sarah surprised everyone with the depth of her response. "What I experienced that night wasn't just a concert or even the thrill of meeting someone famous," she explained. "It was a moment of being truly heard. As a blind person, I'm used to being helped, guided, spoken about rather than spoken to. People see the cane or the dark glasses and make assumptions about my capabilities and limitations. But Michael saw, or heard, something different. He recognized that my way of experiencing his art wasn't lesser than anyone else's, just different. And he honored that difference by creating space for it on his stage. The television appearance resonated with viewers, particularly within the disability community. Sarah began receiving letters and calls from other visually impaired music lovers who had connected deeply with her story. What had been a personal experience was becoming something larger, a conversation about accessibility, perception, and the multifaceted nature of artistic appreciation. Several music education programs for visually impaired students reached out, asking her to speak about her experiences and her unique approach to analyzing musical compositions. Sarah, who had previously worked as a piano tuner, found herself increasingly drawn to music education and advocacy work. 6 months after the Wembley concert, Sarah established the Beyond Sight Foundation, dedicated to creating opportunities for visually impaired individuals to experience and participate in the performing arts. The organization's logo featured a stylized version of the crystal musical note Michael had given her, a symbol of the foundation's core belief that different perceptual abilities offered valuable and unique perspectives on artistic expression. The foundation partnered with venues to provide enhanced audio descriptions of performances, workshops where visually impaired individuals could explore the tactile aspects of musical instruments and theatrical set designs, and recording studios equipped with adaptive technology for aspiring musicians who shared Sarah's condition. Michael Jackson, known for his charitable giving but increasingly private in his personal interactions, made a substantial anonymous donation to Beyond Sight shortly after its formation. The foundation's records listed the contribution simply as coming from a friend who understands the importance of really listening. Those close to the situation understood the source of the generosity, but honored the desire for anonymity. More significant than the financial support, however, was the ongoing mentorship Michael provided to Sarah as she navigated the unfamiliar territories of nonprofit management and public advocacy. Through occasional phone calls and messages relayed through his staff, he offered guidance drawn from his decades of experience with his own charitable foundations. 2 years after their encounter at Wembley, Sarah was invited to Neverland Ranch to help design a music program for visually impaired children that would be implemented at several of the hospitals Michael supported. Walking the grounds of the famous property, her cane tapping gently against the paths, Sarah experienced the place in ways few visitors ever had. Through its sounds, its scents, the feel of sunshine and shade alternating on her skin as she moved between trees, the distant calls of the exotic animals in Michael's private zoo. In the recording studio built on the property, she sat at the piano where parts of Childhood and Stranger in Moscow had been composed, running her sensitive fingers over the keys that had translated Michael's musical ideas into reality. It was during this visit that Michael shared something he had never publicly discussed: how his own relationship with his art had been shaped by experiences of sensory isolation. "When I'm creating," he told Sarah as they sat in the garden, "the sounds of wind through leaves and distant water features creating a natural symphony around them. I sometimes wear earplugs to block out everything except the music in my head. Other times I work in complete darkness, feeling the music rather than seeing the notes on paper. I've always believed that limiting one sense can enhance the others in ways that lead to deeper creative insights." This approach to artistic creation, this deliberate cultivation of alternative perceptual modes, created a profound connection between the global superstar and the blind music lover, a shared understanding that transcended their vastly different life experiences. Over the years that followed, Sarah became a respected figure in both music education and disability advocacy circles. Her foundation expanded its work internationally, creating programs that used music as a bridge between sighted and visually impaired communities. The story of her encounter with Michael Jackson became part of fan lore, recounted in biographies and documentaries as an example of the genuine human connections that occasionally broke through the carefully maintained barrier between the intensely private performer and his public persona. But for Sarah, The most significant legacy of that night at Wembley wasn't the brief celebrity it had brought her, or even the foundation that had grown from it, but the validation of her unique way of experiencing the world. The crystal musical note pendant remained her most treasured possession, worn for special occasions and foundation events. When asked about it in interviews, she would often touch it reflexively, a tactile connection to the moment that had changed her life's trajectory. It reminds me, she would explain, that sometimes being truly seen means being heard. That connection doesn't always require eyes meeting across a room. Sometimes it's about recognizing the truth in someone else's experience of the world, even when it's radically different from your own. On the 10th anniversary of the Wembley concert, Sarah was invited to participate in a tribute performance honoring Michael's musical legacy. On a stage much smaller than the arenas and stadiums of the History Tour, but no less significant for its intimacy, she sat at a piano and performed a hauntingly beautiful arrangement of Will You Be There, her sensitive interpretation highlighting the vulnerability and yearning that she had always heard beneath the song's more produced elements. As the final notes faded, she spoke briefly about how Michael had created space for different ways of experiencing his art, how he had recognized that music could build bridges between people whose perceptions of the world might otherwise never intersect. The true power of Michael's work, she concluded, her unseeing eyes somehow finding the camera that broadcast her words to millions, wasn't just in what we saw, the groundbreaking videos, the revolutionary dance moves, the spectacular stage productions. It was in what we heard when we truly listened. A voice that understood loneliness and longing, joy and hope, the complicated experience of being human in a world that often tries to categorize and simplify us. Michael showed me that night at Wembley that he heard me, truly heard me. And through his music, he continues to hear all of us, in our complexity and our yearning to be understood. If you've been touched by this story of connection across the boundaries of celebrity and ordinary life, of seeing beyond sight and hearing beneath sound, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these intimate glimpses into the moments that revealed the man behind the music, the human being whose capacity for compassion and understanding matched his unparalleled artistic genius. Today, the Beyond Sight Foundation operates in 17 countries, its programs having touched the lives of thousands of visually impaired individuals and changed perceptions about disability and artistic expression in countless communities. At its headquarters in London, visitors are greeted by a small display case containing a white cane adorned with silver bells and a crystal musical note pendant, the tangible artifacts of a moment when a blind fan's words made Michael Jackson cry, and in doing so, initiated a ripple of compassion and understanding that continues to spread outward like sound waves, touching lives far beyond the walls of Wembley Arena on that summer night in 1997.